As much as 91% of men are doing this at least once every month, and over 70% are doing it once a week or more. And yes, we're talking about spicy material online. Is it neutral, or is it actually grinding us into the dirt of modern society that we've become? Let's go.
If I had or do, pornography has not been my thing, and I don't struggle with it. But when I hear from these people, it's so clear that they're asking, is it the prevalence of pornography out there? Or is it something really broken in them? Like, are they broken? But I don't know that I would say, after having the discussion we've had thus far, that they're broken.
Okay, so digging into the numbers, 70% of men age 18 to 30 have used spicy materials at least once in the last week, and 91% of men are currently using it about once a month. That's a huge problem. Also, the average age of exposure to spicy materials is 11. So that means that there are children that are age 6 that are being exposed to this, as well as some probably closer to what you would hope if there's any exposure at all, which would be age 17. That's how we come to an average. And I would hasten to guess that it's probably averaged a little bit younger in boys than in girls, although the curiosity is running both ways at this point. Worse than probably all that, just based on what you would hope for our society, is that the major disseminator of spicy material online gets more traffic than Amazon, Netflix, and Twitter combined. And that means that we are feeding into the system with great volume of eyes and ears watching and listening to this stuff. We are feeding into a system that generally has people at the top who are willing to exploit and endanger people. And at the very least, even if all other things being equal and their motives are not terrible, which they are willing to dampen the mood and the tenor of what a man's life is going to be like at their own gaining from it. They are willing to gain from the abuse of you. And those at the top of these industries absolutely know that they're abusing you, because they are working to make it as addictive as they possibly can, and sending you and releasing to you the things that keep you most engaged, which is like every other addiction. It is an addiction that requires escalation. So you can use the example of alcohol quite easily. If you drank 4 beers a day for a month, you would require 6 beers a day the following month in order to probably get a similar result, depending on your size and stature and everything like that. Because you've built a tolerance, say hi to my chicken in the background, because you've built a tolerance to that alcohol. In the same way, spicy materials online require that you would escalate or seek out new novelty. Men require novelty, we crave novelty, and that's going to necessitate that you seek differences. So what might have started as something more attuned to or more akin to your dad's magazine when you were 11 years old, you move eventually into much more explicit and much more escalated type materials. So things that are stranger, things that are weirder. In fact, one of the most searched and popular items are, cousin to cousin, things like that. Trying to be able to stay within bounds in YouTube is difficult on this topic, but it is up to us to recognize that the people at the top of this industry are willing to exploit you just like a pharmaceutical company would, or just like a tyrannical government would. And at your expense, they are enriching themselves, knowing that they are hurting your life. They have no doubt in their minds that they're hurting us.
No social network or streaming service can come even close to that.
130 million users a day, which, by the way, is reportedly more than Netflix or Amazon,
with reportedly over 3 billion monthly users.
This isn't just a neutral territory anymore. This is mass conditioning. And when a drug or spicy materials online begin to hijack your dopamine system, that means that you're misregulated. Now, your dopamine wants you to maintain balance, or something called homeostasis. And when you spike your dopamine, that automatically comes with a crash, because your brain is trying to correct for the ways that you have artificially, really, in this way, spiked your dopamine. So it's sending you all the negative neurochemicals to make you come down, in a sense. Think about like the day after you went on a binge drinking. Why do you feel so horrible? Well, it's not just the sugars and the alcohol. It's the fact that you felt so artificially good that your mood de-escalates. Your brain attempts to de-escalate that because it sees it as an invading force and it must make corrections.
The 4 C's: out of control use, compulsive use, craving, and consequences, plus 2 physiologic signs and symptoms, one of which is tolerance. Tolerance means your drug stops working over time. You need more potent forms or more of it to get the same effect. And withdrawal means that when you try to cut back or stop, you experience physical withdrawal. And one of the most interesting things to me about sex and pornography addiction is that the withdrawal is incredibly physical. So not only is there this, the universal symptoms of withdrawal: anxiety, irritability, insomnia, dysphoria, but there's also quite a physical, like a fatigue, a kind of general lassitude.
This obviously has a huge effect on our interpersonal relationships. I have been involved with a great many young men who no longer feel that they are able to, or even have the energy to, or the motivation to seek interpersonal relationships with women in actual real life. And part of this is because when you experience at the touch of a button any type of woman, any type of visual stimulation that you desire, it is much more difficult to see the value and uniqueness in your interpersonal relationships in person, because part of what that dopamine is doing, it's not just intended to make you feel good. It's intended to give you motivation to pursue goal-directed behavior. And when you blow all that goal-directed behavior out in one sitting, when you're watching spicy materials, first thing in the morning, for instance, you have much less energy to give to those connections or attempts to make connections. And aside from the fact that because it's revolved around intimacy, that means that most of the motivation that made you a good man in the first place, which is to help you pursue excellence so that you can be worthy of that relationship, has gone out of the system.
And they may be more risk averse. So it might be something that we see particularly with the Zoomers, right? With the younger generation, that they are more risk averse than earlier generations. And there's a lot of kind of converging evidence on that, they're waiting later in life to take risks like getting a job, going to school, getting a driver's license, many of these other things that would indicate, okay, they're kind of hesitant to enter the adult world. So
if you multiply that lack of motivation over the course of 91% of men, even if it's only once monthly that they're partaking, that multiplication of that has led to some of the disconnection between the sexes that we've experienced in the last 15 years. And think about it, in 2010, where was our battle between the sexes at? Yes, there was feminism. Yes, there were, some at odds between the genders. But now it is so much worse, because we are, all of the kindness and all of the things that would give us positive emotion have been directed towards spicy material online. And especially in the case of men, that means that we do not have it to give to those interpersonal connections later throughout the day. This spicy material makes us more passive. It makes us more anxious. It makes us more depressed, because it is naturally devolving our ability to produce the positive neurochemicals like dopamine that would make us feel all of those things, wellness and contentment, throughout any given day. And so it has collapsed men in on themselves. And it's, of course, harmed our ability to see other individuals in our lives without objectifying them.
When we look at the statistics, it becomes apparent that mental health issues are rising. Mental health issues, you see, don't discriminate whether you're male or female, but their impact isn't quite the same for both.
Here's the part that pisses me off so much as a therapist, but more so as a man who is a conservative religious person. I believe that we have been subjugated under the wrath of spicy materials online intentionally. And what I mean by that is, it isn't just the systems who are disseminating this information that have put us in a hole. It's also the people who are supposed to be dealing with it. Now, your pastor might actually have a conversation with you or a couple conversations about this throughout the year, throughout their preaching, throughout their individual ministry. However, the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, for which we are supposed to generate all diagnoses related to mental health and mental illness, refuses to look at it. The best they can do is a conduct disorder type little part, and it's almost a subnote. It's not even a diagnosable mental illness. And here's why. And I swear this is where I get into conspiracy territory. They do not want to admit that it's a problem because their politics will not allow them to. They're an ideologically captured institution that would have to say, oh, maybe it's not empowering for women to essentially give their bodies away on camera. Maybe it's not empowering for us to just dive headlong into technology in an internet era that is ultimately, that's their politics. They would have to say, maybe what we thought ideologically is wrong, and they refuse to do it even though they know that it's doing damage. They can see it's doing damage, and the people like myself who are a therapist at the front lines of the issue are seeing person after person coming into their office saying that this has damaged their lives. It has caused clinically significant distress, which is the term they use to diagnose almost every other mental illness. There is clinically significant distress, but they refuse to talk about it because they would have to admit that their ideology is based on a farce, that they're self-efficacious, that their self-actualization actually might not include just jerking your gherkin at the end of every day and calling that good. It's not good, and they won't admit it.
The fact that we can use pornography privately and anonymously with very little resistance from society, as porn has become so normalized, pushes us towards regular use.
Here's where I need to give some mad credit to Dr. Anna Lembke out of Stanford University, who wrote the book Dopamine Nation, who has dealt with this issue. She writes about it in her book. And in order for me to even work with these populations, I had to reach out to her and I said, where are you finding this in the DSM? How are you diagnosing it so that I can even use my skills as a therapist and as a man of God to try to intervene on this? Because ultimately, they won't let us diagnose it. There is no freaking diagnosis. But she reached back out to me and she said, here's how I wiggle it through. And here's how I'm able to work with these clients, the people that are coming in that have been damaged by spicy materials online, among other things that have to do with intimacy. And she was very magnanimous in her response to me. And she took her time to respond to me twice in kind and with kindness. God bless her. And thank you that at least one psychiatrist out here is fighting the good fight. Now, I know there are more, but it's very limited because it can't be found diagnostically. And therefore, it oftentimes cannot be billed for, which it means that they are trying to stifle anyone who's getting better by this. And honestly, they're not training therapists in how to deal with it. It is a conduct issue where you almost have a compulsive disorder to want to approach these materials online. And that can be reckoned with by training, by prayer, through common means of grace that have been provided by God in order to help us connect with Him instead of connecting with this online nonsense. Now, another part that can be hugely intimidating is that these technologies are going to be more immersive. The people at the top of these organizations, including just social media companies in general, know that it sells, and therefore there is a incentive, there is a monetization that is at the top of this that will mean the people in power will always be a step ahead than the technologies about like AI girlfriends and other things like that are going to increase. So there will be on command and on demand interactions with AI that are going to make this harder and harder to put down. It's up to us to start now, because when you look back in 5 years, you will wish you had. The best time to plant a tree for shade was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. And before these immersive technologies get worse, it's time for us to put it down now. 91% of men are using this at least once a month. It's time now before you actually regret and before it might be too late. This is causing real harm to marriages and obviously how we see men or even just relationships. It doesn't have to be a marriage, but how we see each other, how we see people of the opposite sex has a gigantic matzo ball in the soup related to whether we're watching Spicy Materials or not. First of all, it's really hard to not objectify someone when you see them, but when you meet them, they have imperfections, they have qualities that do not, they talk back. People have issues, they have other things that make them beautiful and good, but they talk back, and the internet does not. Unless you're in AI now, but you can make that AI bot say whatever you want it to say. This is the problem. It causes a gigantic rift in the middle of a relationship. And when you're seeing these materials online, it presents an unrealistic impression about what sex is. It also, in children who are viewing this at age 11, on average, in children, it gives them a misconception about whether this approach of intimacy should be something that they're scared of, whether it involves multiple people, what type of acts are being involved with this. It is an absolute grenade that we have pulled the pin on, and we're holding it in our hand, just waiting for it to go off in our personal lives. And as a man who struggled with this more than a decade ago, I can say forthrightly that it will creep its way in to your internal recesses, and it will present itself as we are attempting to engage with those meaningful relationships that will push our life forward and give us the motivation and the staying power to be the men that we were created to be. Do not let it, because it creeps in like a thief in the night, ultimately being like a seedling that's planted and eventually will germinate into bad fruit in your lives. And that is something that will be a small justification at first, and it will turn into a gigantic addiction if we do not arrest it. Because again, like a drug, it needs to escalate itself because you begin to tolerate it. It needs to escalate in order to cause the same effect if you get to that point. Here at Rumble Right Dad, we talk about the hard issues. I've been a therapist for nearly 13 years now, a father for nearly 10, a husband for nearly 11, and a man in recovery for over 19 years. And I'm here to tell you that this is the addiction of our next era. This is possibly, quite potentially, the addiction of our time. And I can't help but be 5 years ahead of this. I'm sorry that the DSM hasn't recognized it. I'm sorry that there's not even a ton of help out there for this. And I'm especially sorry that a lot of people do not want to admit that it's a problem. But I am here for you. If you need anything, please reach out to me by email. That is on the show channel notes. And I would be happy to try to point you in a direction. I've also been working with men to try to help them get better. Let's do this together. You don't have to do it alone. And there are ways. First and foremost, committing your life to a creator who might be able to be omniscient, who has the ability to be with you at any moment, has a huge impact on whether we will allow ourselves into these types of behaviors that we know are bad for us. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, some people in pastoral care will be able to help you reckon with this issue. There is a lot that can come from the faith community that is helpful. Thirdly, if you're lucky, I can help you find a reasonably good therapist, life coach, someone who can hold you accountable on a weekly basis. That is obviously helpful. There's a reason why confession was persistent throughout the church for a very long time, and traditions are solutions to problems we forgot we had. There are a great many ways that you can arrest and attack this issue, but if you don't start now, it's only going to become more tempting. I've been the Rumble Right Dad. I'm very happy to try to help you address this issue, but I'm just happy that we can talk about it. Thanks for watching, and if this has been any value to you, please like and subscribe. I'll talk to you soon.